This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian and Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, we are here in the fine studios of Pod Populi, podcast for the people. We're at the one in Boca Raton, Florida. It's very nice in Boca Raton, Florida. Every year on this podcast, we try and emphasize different things. We have different points of emphasis. A couple years ago, we spent a lot of time diving into online dating, and then we spent a lot of time a few years ago on breakups and all kinds of things. And one of the points of emphasis that we've spent a lot of time on in the last, 6 months or so, I really like talking about. It's very complicated to talk about. If you remember a few weeks ago, we had Matthew Frey on, and he talked about his book called This Is How a Marriage Ends. We talked about how to get out of bad relationships. We've talked about the importance of constantly moving forward, and on and on and on. So somebody who recently discovered this podcast, she sent me an email the other day, and it said, have you ever read a book backwards? I feel like this is happening to me as I've listened to your podcast in reverse, and I keep looking for insight, blah, blah, blah. She said that, and not blah, 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 what she said. I appreciate the email, and I thought, I don't look at this podcast as a book, because books to me have an ending. And I look at each episode, you could look at it as a book, as each episode's a chapter, and I like that. But one of the reasons why, and I get asked to write a book all the time, is that I don't want to write a book, is because it seems so final. And podcasting lets this conversation continue in a lot of different ways. So if we touch on a subject, 7 months ago, and then there's more to add to the subject, or there's another voice I want to bring into the subject matter, I like doing that in podcast form, because if I ever, and I have written a book, so if I wrote another book and as soon as they sent it to the printer, I'd be like, no, I left something out. Especially in the love, dating, and relationship landscape, it seems to be changing so fast. I can't imagine anything that anybody would write in that department wouldn't be out of date by the time it went to print. So that's a fear of mine. I got to get over that. So if you're going to discover this podcast and listen to it backwards, the most recent podcast is not the end of the book. So you can look at it either way. You can pick it up in the middle and, see the flow of it, see how things we have talked about have changed, see how I've changed on some things, and I have changed on some things, and look at our podcast that way. But I want to talk about somebody who also is interested in this and has a lot of wisdom when it comes to new beginnings and future chapters, and most importantly, the importance of having second acts and third acts and multiple acts in your life. She is the Monarch for Love. She's the host of the Monarch for Love podcast, and I'm glad I lured her in here. Michelle Hayes, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
And I also want a New York accent in here. That always makes me happy. People will say to me all the time, "You're from New York, but you don't really have an accent." And I always have to defend my cred. I'm like, well, I didn't really. I grew up 30 miles outside of New York, and then I lived there. And you're from where?
I am from Long Island.
And for some reason, the Long Island people have an accent, whereas the Westchester County people did not. We're the same distance from New York City. I don't know why that is.
I don't know why it is either, but to be honest, I always try to hide my accent.
Oh, it's great.
And
accents are fun.
Usually when I'm nervous or I'm drinking, that's when my accent really comes out.
Oh, I know. A lot of people have that too. Where like your accent got more severe. A friend of mine who's Australian, I didn't even know she was Australian for a long, long time, because she hides it, which she shouldn't. An Australian accent is something people like. And then she had 2 glasses of wine one time, and I'm like, wait, what? Are you doing a impression?
That's exactly what
and
happens
she's like,
to me.
No, I'm from Perth. I'm like, what? I didn't know that. You heard me a little bit at the opening talk about new beginnings. And you're somebody, I've talked to you about this many times off air. You've always believed in love.
Always.
Is that different from somebody who's a hopeless romantic? Or is there a difference between the two?
I think there is a difference between the two. I think that a hopeless romantic thinks that things just happen naturally. and that it's like a fairy tale. In pop culture, we have like Cinderella and, Pretty Woman and all these things. And I think that for me, believing in love is almost like it's innately in my heart, and I want to succeed at it. And I've spent many years trying to figure it out because I've seen a lot of people fail. I have failed myself in marriages. And you look back and you're like, what did I contribute to that? And, contributing is something we don't always want to see. We very often think, oh, it's them, it's not me. If they would only change, or then I would react different. But really, changing yourself is the first step to being a better partner.
Yeah, I say that all the time. It's almost never that you haven't met the right person. It's almost always that you haven't been the right person.
Exactly.
And that you bring that up. I get asked the same questions a lot when I do interviews and stuff like that. And the first question I always get is, how come you're still single? And the second question I get is, what is the one thing you've learned? And the third question I get, and I get it all the time, is, do you still believe in love? I get that all the time. They're like, after, traveling the world and doing all these live shows. And I go, more than ever.
Yes.
Because if somebody's listening to this podcast, or if somebody comes to one of our Great Love Debate shows, or they're still trying, it means that the hope that they have and the possibilities that exist, that is the most important thing that leads me and them to believe. Because if you believe, if you're working towards it and you're thinking about it and you're trying to figure out, how can I get this thing? Well, absolutely, you should still believe in it, right?
Absolutely. And people lose hope in their marriages and relationships. They get so frustrated, and they're like, oh, you know what? I need out. And they can go to another person and they will find another relationship. I mean, you can always find somebody to love you pretty much, especially in that beginning time when you're just putting out your best self, you're everything that person wants you to be. And then reality hits in and you start being authentic. That's who now you are. And sometimes two people have very different values all of a sudden, and, the dynamics change. So being said, I think that believing in love and really wanting to change your perspective of how you're looking at it, because love is a decision. I always say this. It is an absolute decision that you have to make, and it's a daily decision. It's not something that you say, okay, I'm going to love you on our wedding day, and it's going to be all fluff, and, oh, it's so romantic, and look at these gorgeous pictures, and we look so happy. And then all of a sudden, 5 years down the road, I can't stand you. You make my life miserable.
Yeah, it's not a destination where you get there. It's a journey that you are constantly on, whether by yourself or another person. All of it is a journey. And if people aren't sure if they believe in love, the root of that is almost that they've lost hope.
Yes.
If you find hope, hope leads to possibilities, possibilities lead to love. And if people have not either checked out or don't recognize or don't know how to bring possibilities into their life, it's almost always because they've lost hope. And again, that's tough if somebody has gone through a terrible breakup or lost someone or whatever the circumstance may be, because then hope seems painful. They don't even want, everybody, you would think like, oh, I want to have hope. But for some people, hope, they don't trust hope, and they don't find a path to hope. And just taking those steps to get that back, get your mojo back, and say like, you know what? Oh, look at those. Even if you see two people who look like they're happy or look like they're holding hands or sharing something, a lot of people look at that like, I'll never have that, when you should look at it like, well, it does. That's it. It's proof. It exists. They have it. I'm going to have it too.
Yes, it absolutely exists, but it doesn't exist like that the entire time. Like, you're not holding hands and being happy the entire time. You can look at that same couple and they're smiling and they're happy and they're having a great time together at that moment, but they're going to go home and they're going to have challenges, because every
and they might throw dishes.
Yeah. I was telling Brian about a story when I was so mad and so frustrated that I was actually just chucking the dishes in the sink. So he thought it was a funny story. But yeah, we there's going to be challenges in every relationship. We can't, have these high expectations that everything is just going to come naturally and be happily ever after, because it's not realistic. It's like a roller coaster more. You get in a relationship, you're going to have high highs, and then you're going to drop. The secret is knowing, okay, we're down now, but we're coming back up.
Yeah, and the key is the we.
Yes.
We're in this together.
Yes.
It's not me against you. It's not me then you. It's we're gonna take this journey. It's gonna be scary. It's gonna be confusing. We're gonna get angry. We're gonna get lost. But if you're both continuing to try and move forward, it's the effort. A lot of times, the other person just gives up. It's like the old thing. Like, if I'm mad, it means I still care. And then when you're not mad anymore, that's the worst sign of all. It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It means that you don't matter.
Yeah. Indifference is the worst.
Indifference is the worst.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize what's going on until the quiet of the indifference kicks in.
Right. And then sometimes it's too late.
Then sometimes it's too late. They've already, none of it is easy. It's easier to bring somebody back from anger.
Oh, for sure.
Because anger is at least emotional and they're feeling something for you in the situation. When they've gotten into indifference, sometimes that's genie out of the bottle. That's they don't care.
Yeah.
You want to know the other person cares about you, the situation, the relationship as much as you do. It's hard to make somebody care who does not care.
That's definitely
or
true.
who no longer cares. That's a challenge, and that's just as bad as if they care in the wrong way. People are like, oh, they care too much. I would love somebody to care too much. I can deal with that. Give me the caring, and then I can take that information and that stimuli and make the changes and do whatever I need to do. So when somebody don't care or complete indifference, it's tough to work with.
I think that what happens is that people start feeling unloved in their relationships, and their partner maybe makes choices that are not creating love in their relationship, but they're not necessarily trying to be mean to their partner, because I really believe that genuinely we all want our partners to be happy. We want to make them happy, but sometimes we just don't know how.
Right.
And it's when you don't know how, or worse, you think you can't, is when it stops. You stop trying then.
Or what you used to try doesn't work anymore. And sometimes that's just because you've gone to that well too many times, or sometimes people just change and they need different triggers. And I say triggers in a positive way to react a certain way. But you're both have to constantly try and find new ways to not just keep the love alive and keep the flame alive, but to keep the hope alive that, if we get through this, and that is a huge challenge, especially when people go from husband, wife to mom and dad. They are so buried in survival mode of the kids that they do not spend the time or make the effort or even say, I can't even deal with our relationship right now. That's got to be tough.
Oh, you get overwhelmed. You're like, you kind of lose yourself as well as a parent sometimes, especially moms, and nowadays even more so dads are really into caregiving as well, which is a really amazing evolution of men and women together, because it's so hard to do it alone. It's challenging, but we stop talking. We only start talking about our kids, and then we don't have anything in common anymore but the kids.
It's all about recital and soccer practice and college fund and somebody's got to get a tooth out. And it is. And then it's like the us that we had, you kind of look at it like it's gone forever. Yeah. And you still have to, in every situation like that is you have to always retain yourself. You always have to retain the romance of the relationship. And then the third part of that is the family and the mom and dad or whatever. And one tends to dwarf all the other. Yeah. And even if you don't have kids, the relationship sometimes tends to dwarf and drown the sense of you. And then when you've sort of lost yourself, it's actually affects the other person, because the other person can't really see it either. They can't really see you and what you need and what you like and all of those things. It is a challenge. We're constantly doing a balancing act to get into a relationship. And sometimes we don't think as much once we're in it. We look at it as, oh, I made it. I'm here. Yeah. I'm engaged. I'm married. We're happy. We bought a house together. There's so much more that goes into it.
Oh, my goodness, definitely. You have to maintain your relationship. You have to make that daily decision. Hey, I'm going to take the time quality time is very important for relationships. I mean, we can't really have a connection without quality time and, deeper conversations.